Good morning, Parshas Behar, page 696. 696.
696.
Good to see everyone.
Went to walk for Easter, the UK walk yesterday.
Oh yeah.
Very
Nice.
laboring, very laboring.
Parshas Behar. Parshas Behar. Why is this parsha called Parshas Behar? Reason is that in the first verse you will find a very common verse, Vaydaber Hashem el Moshe lemor. However, here we are told that the Almighty spoke to Moshe Behar Sinai, that you should know that what is taking place here is that the information that Moshe Rabbeinu got, he got from Har Sinai, which obviously is difficult. There's a general rule. All of Torah was given at Har Sinai. So why are we told specifically here that you should know the information was given at Mount Sinai? So different explanations are given, and obviously there has to be something that relates to the significance of the message of this week's parasha. And commentators note that this parasha talks about the Shemitah. In other words, we as Jews work 6 days and rest on the 7th. It is not just a resting because you collapse after 6 days of work. It is not just the day when you do nothing. If that would be the goal of Shabbat, it would be very, very different than the Shabbat we know. In other words, if it is indeed a day of rest, right? Why am I in shul 3.5 hours, you'll ask yourself. Is this the most ideal place for resting? Why is a 45-minute speech really the symbol of rest? Maybe for some. And for some people it is a time, right? You know the famous story that someone says to the rabbi that after your speeches on Shabbat I have a hard time sleeping at night. Why is that? Because when I nap during the day, right? So, but really, Shabbat is much more than that. Shabbat is really to give us purpose, direction, and the older we get, the more we are seeking it. We start asking ourselves, what is this existence about, right? What is this absurd world about? We're seeking answers. And the day 7 really gives us clarity. It gives us direction. It encourages us. It gives us purpose. And when you have purpose, you could do things with enthusiasm. That's a successful Shabbat, right? So how do you define a successful Shabbat? And number 1, don't overeat, right? Number 2, be sure that all the food is healthy. If it's raw sushi, be sure that it's, speak to your doctor if it's a smart thing. In other words, there's a list of physical aspects that relate to Shabbat, but there's something spiritual, meaning it has to be a day that you get some clarity, you get some direction, and you can walk into your work day with understanding. And the Jew that really understands his purpose deals with the weekday challenges very, very differently, because suddenly I have understanding that God wants me to go through this roller coaster called life. God wants me to deal with it, and there's purpose, and I accept it. That's what a successful Shabbat does. The 7th day really infuses meaning into all 6. So to the land of Israel. The land of Israel on the surface is very, very similar to all other lands, right? The land of Israel is incredibly beautiful, but there are some nice areas as well in northern Pennsylvania. I know, I did do some driving yesterday. Where Baruch Hashem, we merited to be at a Vort for my son on Sunday in this ridiculous place called New York City. And, you have some painful driving there in New York City. And then after you enhance the financial situation by paying all those tolls to New York City, you drive, there are areas that are magnificent. So there's great beauty throughout the world. The world's a beautiful place. United States, you've traveled the world, you've seen it. Eretz Yisrael is beautiful as well. In some ways, it is like any other land. But when you sit down, right, and start thinking of what the history of Eretz Yisrael is about, what the Jewish people are about, the fact that we have returned, the fact that it is a land that was given to the Jewish people, and we are told you should know, when you work the fields in Eretz Yisrael, you're doing something spiritual, right? You're connecting to your identity. There's something incredible there, but it has to be achieved with mindfulness. You need that number 7 to infuse direction, right? To go ahead and give you clarity of the significance of those 6 regular years. That's what Shemitah is about. Very, very important message. And that is what we will find here in the first section of this parasha, that you should know. Tell the people of Israel in verse 3, Shesh Shanim Tizra Sadecha. For 6 years, you're going to sow your field. For 6 years, you're going to prune your vineyard. You're going to gather your crop. But the 7th year, don't work the land. Don't work the land. And it's a reminder that it's given to you by God because you're not going to treat your field as your own. It's going to belong really to everyone. You're going to open it up. You're not allowed to go ahead and lock your fences. It should be that everyone could share with you, right? It belongs to the nation. And it is a time that if you are not working, what do? You sit, you study, you meditate. It's really the real sabbatical comes from this idea. Right? In some industries you have, right, that you have to take a year off to give you direction, to go ahead and re-energize someone. This is what it's all about. This is the Shemitah. Now, section number 2, we are told that you should know that year 50 is a far greater Shemitah, and it is known as the Jubilee. It is a time of freedom. Slaves return to their owners. So this is information we are very, very familiar with. But now, something very interesting occurs in the land of Israel. When I sell you land in Eretz Israel, it is really a lease. Meaning, if I own the land, it's ancestral land, and I sell it to you, we need to know when the Yovel is going to take place. Because come the Jubilee year, the land is going to return to its original owner. So now you have to be familiar with the calendar because that will have a very significant impact on the pricing. So imagine now, again, at a time that many people probably did not have the tools we have today. We all have our calendars, right? We all know what year it is. I think of a world of people that did not know how to read or write, right? They did not have apps, they did not have calendars, they did not get newspapers. How did they know that it's a Jubilee? Well, maybe the year beforehand, some people would get the word out, but not everyone had that information. So here we have a major problem that could occur. I'm knowledgeable, and I know that in 3 years from now it's the Jubilee, and the return is the land that I'm selling to you is going to be returning to me. You don't know. You think it's in about 7-8 years from now. So I can I can have a solid deal here. I could sell you a field and say, yeah, you think it's from 7 years from now? Fine. We establish a price based on the buyer's assumption. And then 3 years later, what do? Inside information. Basically, that's what it's about. I know something that the buyer does not buy. I could cheat you. So the Torah tells us, here we go. So this comes here, the theme we're going to be focusing on today, which appears in verse 14. Due to the fact that this Jubilee is a time when property returns to its original owner, and it also relates to direction, to understanding our essence. So, but V'chi timker, you see verse 14, I want to focus on it. V'chi simkeru minkar la'amitecha. When you go ahead and sell to your fellow, o kano miyad amitecha, or you make a purchase. So we are warned in these 5 words, al tonu. Do not go ahead and agree. Do not cheat. Ish et achiv. A person to his brother. No cheating. Okay? Be fair in the marketplace. And the Talmud has a detailed discussion of what that means exactly. In other words, if there's a going market price for a specific item, right? Maybe we'll close the doors. That's a good idea. If there's a given market price, if let's say a pound of potatoes goes everywhere for $1, I am not allowed to charge you more than $1.25. there's actually, right now, before we start analyzing what's occurring today, there is obviously a service. In other words, when you walk into Pusateri's, if I know the name, if I got the name right, and you walk in, and you're going to pay a premium there, it's a little bit for the experience. It's for the experience. You feel good. You could shop in Bayview Village, right? And you feel something that those tangerines that you get at No Frills for $1.99, there's something special about buying it for $7.99. You feel good about it. So that is a decision you make. But if you are in Shuk Machne Yehuda, right? You obviously up until a quarter more of the price, 25%. Up until 25%, things fluctuate. Some potatoes could be different than other potatoes. But to go ahead and charge someone for a cab ride, right? 15 times the price, you are cheating someone else. That's called ona'ah. So it is all derived from this idea. Do not cheat an individual. A whole section, a whole chapter in the Talmud that relates to this concept called ona'ah. Al tonu ish et achiv. That's what really defines us as Jews, that we realize that our religion is not just for the sanctuaries, our religion is not just for the synagogues, our religion is for the marketplace. Be honest in the marketplace. And that's going to be spelled out in verse 15 and 16. So let's read it carefully. Bemispar shanim achar hayovel tikne me'et amitecha. In other words, according to the number of years after the Jubilee, you shall go ahead and buy from your fellow. And obviously, there could be a situation of cheating by the buyer's end. The buyers could cheat sellers as well. In a situation that the buyer has information that the Jubilee is going to be occurring in many years from now and the seller doesn't know it. So be aware, be mindful of that. So this is what we are told in verse 15 and 16. Since the Jubilee causes all property to return, know when it is and be honest and open when you have a transaction occurring. Now, verse 17, Velo tonu ish et amito. You should not go ahead and cheat, you should not go ahead and aggrieve your fellow. V'yareta melokecha, and fear God. Wonderful. Now, the question is, why in verse 17 do we repeat this idea of not aggrieving, not cheating your fellow? Why is it repeated? It makes its appearance before it describes the details of how it could be done. And then after the details are spelled out, we are told again, Al tonu ish et amito. Okay, difficult. Question number 2 you're going to ask is, go ahead.
No, what's the difference between ish and between achiv and amito?
Question number 2 is, wait a second. If the Torah wants to strengthen it by repeating an idea, okay, we're going to accept that. But here there's a switch. When earlier it says achiv, and then it switches to amito. So there's great difficulty in understanding it. So comes the Talmud. This is a tractate of the Talmud called Baba Metzia. Baba Metzia. What on earth does the word Baba Metzia mean? So the word Baba is like a section. Metzia comes from the word Emtza, the middle section. What is this the middle section of? So a significant tractate is called Nezikin. That relates to damages and issues in the marketplace, damages, property stolen. Now, it is so significant that when the rabbis studied it and they established to make it part of an order, they realized that they have to break it into 3. So the discussions that relate to damages was so significant because that's what really Judaism is about, sensitivity to the other. So they broke it into 3 sections. Section number 1 is called Baba Kama, the first one. Kama is first in Aramaic. Section number 2 is Baba Metzia, the middle section. And the third one is called Baba Batra, the last one. Right? Now, Baba Metzia, chapter number 4, has a detailed discussion of Ona'at Mammon. Ona'ah, aggrieving or cheating in monetary issues. Don't charge more than what the rabbis call a chomesh. Believe it or not, even though it sounds like a fifth, it's actually a quarter more. It's 25% more, because when you charge something that really costs 100 in the marketplace, and you're charging 125, it's really a fifth of 125. But the math aside, there's a detailed discussion, very fascinating and very relevant. But then the rabbis add the following, that you should know. When you cheat someone, you're causing them not just a financial loss, but there's a pain. There's a pain when you're cheated. And I think we've all felt it. Have you ever booked tickets online? And then right after you can't cancel it, you get a notice that there's a sale. Did it ever happen to you? Isn't there some kind of this ouch you feel? It's something very interesting, right? We always have to talk to ourselves. We always have to talk to ourselves when that happens, right? And that is that after 120, right, no one leaves this world where the bank account is exactly zero. In other words, odds are, God willing, we'll leave some. So a little bit left. In other words, you have to talk to yourself that you shouldn't let this irrelevant, insignificant difference to have an impact. But it's human nature. It's human nature. So the rabbis understood very well that that pain of being cheated could also be caused by other people when they say the wrong thing. And that, I have no doubt, we've all experienced. The problem is we all remember the wrong things said to us, and there's a chance that we don't always remember the wrong things we said to others. Right? That's, again, the way we work. And the rabbis use one of the most powerful messages in the Talmud. When you have a detailed tractate that is talking all about monetary issues and finances and exchange rates, what do the rabbis tell us? Kishem, that you should know, just as there is an ona'ah, that you could cause an affliction, a pain, you could aggravate someone, b'mekach u'memkar, with commerce, the rabbis say, kach ona'ah bidvarim, so too, you could cause pain with words. And the mouth is a very dangerous weapon, right? There was a comedian in Israel by the name of Dudu Topazov of Hashem, and he used to say that when he would come to the airport and they would ask him, do you have any weapons? He would say, yes, my tongue. And the truth is, the mouth is a weapon. What we can do with words is incredible. You could do good, right? Encouragement at the right time. A positive word, you could remember forever. I could still remember things, right, said to me 40 years ago, right? Unfortunately, we remember more than negative, and obviously I forgive the individual for saying, but human nature is such. The mouth is powerful. The rabbis tell us, in this section that relates to monetary issues, that you should know. Lo yomar, so they give us a list. The rabbis present for us examples of how you could violate it. In other words, imagine you have a makolet in Israel, and his sales are not so great. And you decide that you're going to have some fun with him. So you walk in, and you ask him for, this is makolet from my childhood, okay, where it was not a modern-day supermarket, but if you would want a can of olives, you would have to get his ladder, climb up, bring it down. So you ask him, how much is the can of olives? And you have absolutely no interest, but you want to be entertained a little bit. So the rabbis say, Lo yomar lo. Don't say to him, Bekama chefet zeh. How much does this cost? V'hu eino rotzeh likach. And you have absolutely no interest. Now again, in the modern world, when you go into stores, right, and you try something on with no interest, usually you're going to walk out with it. That's how, and they know it very well, and they're very, very happy that you walk into the Apple store, to the Microsoft store, and play with the latest gadget. Because even if you don't buy it now, at least they implant into your head that it is something you should be buying in the future, right? There was a rabbi in the United States, his name was Rabbi Kaplan, he used to say that in the past, if there was a need for something, you would buy it. Today they create the product, they convince you there's a need, and then you go ahead and buy it. So times have changed, but the message of being sensitive to someone has not changed. Number two, the rabbis tell us, Im haya ba'al tshuva, if you meet someone that is a ba'al tshuva, and he did things in the past that he's not proud of, lo yomar lo, don't say to him, zechor ma'asech harishanim, you're interacting with someone. You know that he made some significant mistakes in the past. You want to go ahead and, as they would say, shtach, you want to go ahead and cause him a level of pain. Don't do that. That's the same ona'ah. So to imhu ben gerim, if he is son of converts, don't go ahead. Lo yomar lo zechor maseh avotecha. You don't tell me what to do. I come from a great family. Who do you come from? Don't say that. Shene'emar, and the verses are obviously spelled here. And come the rabbis in the Talmud, and they tell us the following. If you look at the Torah, say the rabbis, the Torah tells us, as we mentioned in verse 15, don't cheat when it comes to financial matters. Don't aggravate someone in financial matters. Al tonu ish et achiv. So why is it, asks the Talmud, that the Torah has to repeat this message with lo tonu ish et amito, which appears in verse 17? The answer is, it is coming to include in the prohibition ona'ah, pain caused with words. So again, back to our text in the Torah. When you saw in verse 15, al tonu ish et achiv. Achiv is talking about transactions in the marketplace. You aggravate someone because you overcharge. And when it comes to al tonu ish et amito, in the words of Rashi, it relates to ona'ah, pain caused through words. Fine? But what's the relationship? In other words, if the Torah wants to tell you, be sensitive with your words, great message. Why specifically is it shared in an area that discusses commerce? So one rabbi, the Netziv, says that you should know, if you have been to the shuk, people argue over prices. And it's always interesting sometimes to bring someone from a shuk mentality and put them in a Walmart, right? And they try to argue, with the cashier at Walmart, right, over the price. These things have happened. But if you think about a shuk or the Grand Bazaar, you're thinking about arguing about the price. You're going to thinking about a negotiation. So he writes, the Netziv said, it is quite common that you're going to go ahead and get agitated a little bit and use some harsh words. So therefore, perhaps it's an appropriate location to mention that we should be sensitive with our words at a discussion that relates to commerce. Fine. That's one explanation that's given. Now, the general idea of not cheating, the general idea of being sensitive, one of the commentators says the following, that you should know, we are coming to the end of a book, the book of Vayikra, that's called Torat Kohanim. It's all about the Kohanim. That's the main focus. Kohanim, as mentioned here many, many times, teach you the value of life, right? The value of existence. The Kohen is a person that understands that you have your ups and your downs, and you're a good person even when you are on a down. You have value. There's value in existence. There's value in nature. It gives you that boost that you should know you have significance, right? I was driving in New York, and you get to the Verrazanos, and there's a sign on the pit where I didn't even see a place for pedestrians to make their way, but there was a big sign on the bridge, value your life, right? If you have an issue, call. There was a number to call for people that perhaps have that desire to climb the bridge, which most probably happens often enough that they have to put up a sign. So they should have a Kohen stationed right there, right? They should go ahead and get a Kohen. You should be paid by taxpayers in New York State. They're very generous in New York State with taxpayers' money, so they built these magnificent welcome centers, right? That it's very nice to be so generous with other people's money, but they could perhaps put a Kohen there. The Kohen could talk to him about purpose. You wake up, you take a breath, you're doing something. It is meaningful. Life is meaningful. This is really the Kohen's message. Now, after we have solidified this message of the purpose of existence, and that when you have that down, there's something being achieved even in the down. You know what the Torah could remind you? The Torah could remind you in a gentle way, you actually are not a permanent resident in this world, right? That eventually things move on. The greatest message of, that time is passing are milestones, right? Significant birthdays that come, right? Any birthday that ends with a zero is one that is difficult to deal with. Perhaps as someone that is dealing, I have a long time, but Be'ezras Hashem, I'm going to be reaching one of those zero-ending birthdays within the next year. And you start thinking to yourself, like, Gewalt, like, what on earth is going on, right? And there are moments that occur that you ask yourself, how did this happen overnight? Like, you see a little, the little kid, suddenly an adult, like, there's things that are very overwhelming. We were at, this engagement, this Vort in New York, and a young lady, already with the shaitel, a young lady already, she introduces herself, and I remembered her from Memphis as a 6 and 7 year old, right? I'm like, what happened? Like, how did you do that so fast? Like, it was only...
It's only 2 years.
So the idea of time passing has this impact that, what? We're not here forever. Now, what happens when it hits you, we're not here forever? So there's a fork in the road. You could take the bad approach, and you could take the good approach. Now, the greatest of all awakening moments, I think, was the Yovel. The Jubilee. Like, imagine you are Kenai Nahara in your 70s, and you remember the Yovel from when you were in the 20s. I could just think about what people went through. Like, there's a blessing you make every 28 years. The Birkat HaChama, a blessing over the sun. And I still remember I was a child in Yerushalayim, and at the exact year I don't know if I was 10, 11, or 12, or something like that, around that age, and they had this Birkat HaChama. And as a child it was significant to some extent, some blessing outside. And then a few weeks later we were in the schoolyard, and three kids, let's say 11-year-olds, walk outside of the permitted area, and you're just looking around, and the Rebbe comes over and says, guys, come back in. We're not doing Birkat Chama. Next time you'll do Birkat Chama, you're going to be much older already. Right? Now, this because we were just standing. So we walked back in, and for some reason those words penetrated my ear. And then, about 10 years ago, we're Memphis, and I do Birkat Chama, and I hear the Rebbe saying, you're going to be an old guy already when you do Birkat Chama. Yeah. Right? Gewalt, 28 years. Scary. Now let's do the 50-year experience. Now I cannot have an idea how that feels. But if you remember things from 50 years ago, right, the last time the Leafs won or something like that.
That was more than 50.
That was more than 50. Yeah. So it is a moment of, oh boy, what's existence about? So now let's deal with it. Let's deal with it the proper way, right? And not the improper way. The improper way would be Gewalt, what's the purpose? We're moving on, right? What's the purpose of existence? It's just enjoy. The real way is let's realize what an opportunity it is, right? Let's go ahead and realize that we have values we live by. And when we perform them, we are enhancing ourselves. We are enhancing the world. Do the right thing with that information. Okay, now, when I go ahead and have that Jubilee impact in an improper way, there's the story of a person who studied ethics, Musar, that you have to be a good Jew, that you have to be not so sensitive to the words of others, because you have to be mindful, you have to be forgiving, right? So I just studied it in text, that a good Jew is forgiving. So I walk over to another person and say, you're such a good for nothing. He says, you hurt my feelings. I said, well, I just studied in the text that you have to overcome harsh words. So it's an opportunity for you to overcome harsh words, right? It's like the chassan who's learning a little bit about marriage, and he was told by his chassan teacher that marriage is all about giving in. So he calls the kala and he says, I have some good news. I really have some guidance for you how to be a good wife. The chassan teacher just told me that marriage is all about giving in. So I have no doubt that you'll be able to go ahead and do it for the next many decades. So that is sometimes the byproduct, right, of looking at life as something that is insignificant. The proper way is that when you hear these messages, make it part of your identity. And here we go. The Jubilee shakes you up. So now I'm shaken. I come to the marketplace. How am I going to view the world? So number one, understand that there's value in existence, and even though it is temporary, be ethical. Be sensitive to the others, right? We're not here forever, the other's not here forever. You altanu ishet achiv. And number two, be sensitive with your words. So you see a little bit of how this comes into the picture, that it's a very shaking section of our existence, but we're told, when you are shaken, go ahead, see direction, see purpose, and develop the sensitivity that Judaism really calls for. Now that's piece of information number one. So now, what we do have in this parsha is the idea that Yovel is an awakening moment, and the awakening moment for us Jews is really a calling to become a better person. It is a calling to appreciate the opportunity we are given in this world to become a better person. It relates to commerce, and it relates to the words uttered by your mouth. But now that we have an understanding of these two messages, so Josh asked earlier, Al tonu ish et achiv, when it comes to commerce. When it comes to the sensitivity that we are required to have when we utter words, Al tanu ish et amito. Why the difference? When I was 10 years old, my family moved to Israel. And my Hebrew needed improvement. So I got, there was a morah that we had some kind of, I don't know what's called an ulpan. We had some kind of Hebrew lessons. And I had some difficulty with the difference between the im with an aleph and the im with an ayin. I had some difficulty. Now, im with an aleph is if. Titen li matana odelecha, I'll be thankful. Now, im with an ayin is with you. So I'm having difficulty. And the morah suddenly grabs, she takes my hand, but she grabs it by putting her arm around mine and grabs my hand and stretches it, and we create a script ayin by doing it. You understand? I'll get someone else to assist me, but basically her hand came here and came there, and we created an ayin, and I'm like that, and she says to me, ayin ze'im, ata, you are with me now, right? And I put down my arm, and the pain remained, but the message remained a little longer. That's how I remember that im is with someone else. It really worked. Now, when I am closer to someone, right, when I share something with someone, I have that great responsibility of what I say and how the words impact them. Now, we've been often in situations where I meet someone, I ask a random question, and we'll call it a very parva question, right? Like, for example, so how was your day yesterday? And they suddenly explode. Do you want to know what happened to me yesterday? No, you reminded me of yesterday. Yesterday I went, to the government office, and they made me go to the other side, and I had to pay a fine. Oh boy, did you just agitate me by mentioning yesterday? And you're sitting there like, what did I ask already? Right? Now, should I feel bad? Obviously not, because I walked in with zero information about them. Zero information. I had no knowledge. I just asked a very parva question. There's always a sensitivity you have to have, right? There are questions you have to think better not to ask. But the general rule is a parva question, if indeed you get that attack, worry not, because you did not have the information. On the other hand, if I know something about someone, I know that they made some significant mistakes in the past, right? I know about their family history, that their grandfather was known as the bandit from Benzin, and I can come up with some, I have to be careful with that, because it is a Toronto, a lot of people are, it's a very, but, I know something, am I in trouble now? Okay. It's interesting, something called Benzin, some Bendin. It's interesting that the Jews, there's some kind of history, but I work with bandit like this, so I have to use. If I know something and I use that information to hurt the other person, that is on advarim. Okay, so you hear the idea that when do I go ahead and violate the second statement? Al tonu ish et amito. The word amito comes from imo, with him. When I am with you, when am I with you? When I know things about you. The closer you are to someone, the more you know about them. You know about their weaknesses. You know about their sensitivities. You know about their struggles. You know a little bit about their childhood. You know about what the journey they went through. You have to be careful that what comes out of your mouth is not going to go ahead and cause them pain. Okay, so it's only with amito. On the other hand, when it comes to a transaction in the marketplace, I don't know, all Jews are my brothers and sisters. I have a responsibility, right? What I violate with financial transaction is really the result of the fact that they are my brothers and they are my sisters. So therefore, in statement number 1, al tanu ish et achiv, right? You go into the marketplace in Machne Yehuda, right? Or you go into an antique shop, and by the way, even though it talks about achiv as Jews, we take the general approach that if you are dealing with Gentiles that have ethics and values, you have the same sensitivity. But on the most basic level, especially in Talmudic times, when the Gentiles they interacted with were very, very far from values, the statement of achiv related to your fellow Jew. So if I walk into a marketplace and it's a fellow Jew, I know nothing about the seller, he knows nothing about me. We have a responsibility because we are achim. So therefore he shouldn't cheat me and be charging me double the price. When it comes to statement number 2, when it comes to al tanu ish et amito, it is simply when we have something in common, when I know the person, right? When you know the spouse, and you know exactly what is going to cause them to be hurt. That is when there is this responsibility, this great responsibility of what is said. So this is the rule, and that really explains the idea why there's a switch from achiv to amito. They note, when we talk about this knowledge that we're not permanent beings in the world, and we do have, and it is important to always remember, to be forgiving. It is a true concept. In other words, although I have to have this mindfulness for what comes out of my mouth, I still have the responsibility that if someone else uses those harsh words towards me, I have to be forgiving. I have to talk to myself, right? And there are different tools that you could use. It's all from above, right? There's a reason. Perhaps I can learn from it. I should be forgiving. The person is having a difficult day. So there's a story shared that once Rabbi Salant was giving one of these messages to his students of being forgiving, not focusing on your own needs. But he added that you should know that the other person's physical needs are your spiritual responsibility. This is a famous term that Rabbi Salant coined. The other person's gashmiyut, a term that's used for the physical needs, are your spiritual responsibility. And it's very, very dangerous when you walk out of the Yovel experience, right? And you think, what's the significance of things of this world? And someone else needs something, right? To go ahead and use the impact of the insignificance of the world and then not give someone what he needs, right? That is considered a great violation. You have to go ahead and use messages for yourself of, things are not so important, and be forgiving. And if you were cheated a little bit, move on. But God forbid to allow that, then in turn, you go ahead and cause it on others. This is what he always would note with such ideas. But at least we get a clarity. Lo tanu ish et amito. However, right afterwards in verse 17, something else is added. V'yareta me'elokecha, fear God. It's obvious that when I walk into the store and I ask for the price of the can of olives, I could always claim, if a friend of mine says, you know what, that wasn't nice, the guy worked hard to schlep down the olives, he gave you the price, you had no interest in it, I could always claim, you know what, I really wanted to buy it. You could lie, you could be dishonest. So the verse tells us that you could fool everyone, right? And sometimes we can even fool ourselves, but you can't fool God. When it works to ona'at varim, when it works to the pain that we are addressing here caused by words, you can't fool God. And it has to do with intention. And, the truth is, there are many painful experiences that sometimes we share with people. And to go ahead and use it against them, is the true and pure ona'at varim. In 1974, in Israel, which we do, I don't remember 1974, but you remember 1974, Golda Meir ended her reign as prime minister, not in the greatest circumstances, right? It was right after the Yom Kippur War, and even though historians argue she's not to blame, right? And if you want to blame someone, probably you could put it more on Moshe Dayan, correct? Because he was the military man, and but nevertheless, she took it hard. And there was a war within the Labour Party as to who's going to become the next head of the party, and in their mind, prime minister for the next several decades. So we've talked in the past about the rivalry between Shimon Peres and Yitzhak Rabin. So it was a tough race where Shimon Rabin was the real politician, Yitzhak Rabin was the straight shooter, and among the supporters of Shimon Peres was a fellow by the name of Ezer Weitzman. Remember him? Mm-hmm. Ezer Weitzman. And Ezer Weitzman wanted Shimon Peres to win, and he didn't like Rabin so much. So right before the election, he went to the media, and he shared what is known to us by now, known to everyone, that in the height of the weeks leading to the 1967 Six-Day War, Yitzhak Rabin had a mental breakdown, right? He basically was out for several hours. The chief of staff, just think about it for a second, right? When you give credit to Tzahal for the success, remember that there was a God behind the scene, because if here you have the chief of staff that was out of commission for several hours. A mental breakdown, and you can't blame him. It was the tension was great. So now, Ezer Weitzman knew about it because of his closeness to Yitzhak Rabin. Yitzhak Rabin, they shared things. They were both involved in the military at the time. And Ezer Weitzman went ahead and used it as a tool to hurt him. Now, obviously, it didn't work for that. It didn't work at that time. It ruined his reputation. But there was an ayin there, right? There was the im, right? The ayin of Ezer. The ayin was there. He knew him, right? There was a connection. They were people who shared information. The one you share information with, that is where you have that responsibility of al tanu ish et amita, and hopefully a message that is a significant one with the power of words and something we can walk away with. I thank you very much for coming and listening, and have yourself a wonderful day.